I was one signature away from handing her everything, until I froze in the hallway and heard her laughing about it with him. She'd been running her plan for 8 months while I sat across from her at dinner every night. Every word she said just bought her a front row seat to her own downfall. My name is Stephen Langley. I'm 47 years old. I co-own an environmental consulting firm based out of Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of company that advises industrial clients on regulatory compliance, land remediation, waste management contracts. We built it over 12 years from a 2-person operation in a rented office above a dry cleaner to a staff of 19 and contracts with 4 state agencies. I'm proud of that. I earned it. I've been married to Pamela for 14 years. She's 42, sharp, good-looking in a way that photographs well, and for most of our marriage I would have called her my partner in every sense of the word. She handled the household finances, managed our investment accounts, and sat across from me at more dinner tables than I can count while I talked through business decisions she always seemed genuinely interested in. I thought we were solid. I thought we built something that held weight. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I chose to walk past. The long stretches of silence that didn't feel like peace. The way she'd look at her phone and set it face down before I could ask who texted. The evenings she started spending at networking events for a professional women's group she joined 18 months ago. I told myself those were the signs of a woman staying active, staying engaged. I told myself a lot of things. If I could go back and change one decision, it would be this. I would have paid attention sooner. Not out of suspicion, but out of the basic respect a man owes himself. The kind that says you deserve to know what's happening in your own house. But I didn't. And so we arrived at that Thursday morning in October. The divorce had been my idea. We'd had a rough year, distant, cold, more like roommates than spouses. I'd suggested counseling twice. She declined twice. So I did what I thought was the mature thing. I consulted a lawyer, Carolyn Drake, who had the kind of quiet, measured confidence that made you feel like the situation was already under control. We drafted the paperwork. I signed my copy. The plan was to hand-deliver the documents to Carolyn's office that afternoon and let the process begin. I was dressed and ready by 9. Suit jacket on the chair, briefcase by the door, signed documents in a manila envelope tucked inside. I went back down the hall for my travel mug. Coffee, black, same as every morning for 20 years. That's when I heard her. Pamela was in the kitchen. I could tell by the direction of her voice, low and loose, the way she talked when she thought no one was within earshot. There was another voice on the line, male, self-assured, with a laugh that arrived before the punchline did. I stopped in the hallway, 6 feet from the kitchen doorway, and I stood there like a man who had just stepped on ice and was waiting to find out how thick it was. He has no idea, Pamela said. He's been so wrapped up in that company, he hasn't noticed anything for months. The male voice replied, warm with amusement. And the papers? He's actually filing. He thinks he is. She laughed, and it wasn't a nervous laugh or a guilty one. It was the laugh of someone who believed they were running the table. Once he signs everything over and walks out the door, we move. The accounts, the business share, the property. All of it transfers clean. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The travel mug stayed on the hallway shelf. She kept talking. Lance, I've been setting this up for 8 months. He's going to hand me everything and think it was his own idea. Lance. The name landed like a stone dropped in still water. I was one signature away from handing her everything. And then I stood in that hallway and heard her laughing about it with him. Every single word out her mouth was buying her a front row seat to her own downfall. She just didn't know it yet. I didn't walk into the kitchen. I didn't say a word. I turned around, walked back to the study at the far end of the house, and closed the door behind me without a sound. My hands were steady. That surprised me a little. I sat down at my desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the folder I'd labeled reference. Legal 3 years ago during a contract dispute with a county agency. Inside were copies of our prenuptial agreement, the original business registration documents, the deed to our home, and a USB drive I'd encrypted with Carolyn's office after a health scare 2 years back made me think about what I'd leave behind. I thought about Pamela's voice. Easy, rehearsed, completely unbothered. 8 months. She'd said 8 months. I opened my phone and typed one message to Carolyn. Don't file. Need to meet today. In person. Then I put the phone face down on the desk and sat quietly for a moment, listening to the house around me. Somewhere down the hall, Pamela was still laughing. Let her. I sat in that study for 40 minutes before I moved again. Not because I was paralyzed. I've never been that kind of man. I sat there because I needed to think clearly, and clear thinking requires stillness. My father used to say that a man who acts on heat alone burns down his own house. I wasn't going to burn anything down. Not yet. The folder was open in front of me. I went through it page by page, methodically, the way I review a regulatory compliance report before signing off on it. The prenuptial agreement came first, 12 pages, signed by both of us the year we got married, notarized by Pamela's own cousin as a favor, notarized by Pamela's own cousin as a favor. I found what I was looking for on page 8. Clause 11. In the event that either party engages in deliberate misrepresentation regarding shared or individual assets, the injured party retains full discretionary rights over those assets pending arbitration, without requirement of prior negotiation. Pamela had signed directly beneath it. Her signature hadn't changed in 14 years. I set the prenup aside and pulled up our joint account on my laptop. I wasn't looking for anything dramatic. I was looking for a pattern. And there was small transfers over the past 7 months, always rounded figures, always labeled with something mundane. Grocery run, home supplies, car maintenance. Individually, nothing alarming. Together, they told a story. Nearly $40,000, moved in quiet increments to an account I didn't recognize. I opened a new spreadsheet and started logging every transaction. Date, amount, destination. I didn't rush. I just worked. Around noon, I heard Pamela leave the house. The garage door opened. The car backed out. The neighborhood went quiet again. I waited until the sound of her engine faded before I picked up my phone and called my cousin Ray. Ray Brunner is 48, runs a general contracting business out of Raleigh, and has been my closest friend since we were teenagers throwing a football in my grandmother's backyard. He'd met Pamela at our wedding and liked her well enough, but 2 Christmases ago he'd pulled me aside after dinner and said, quietly, "Steve, I don't know what's going on with her lately, but something's off. Just keep your eyes open." I told him he was reading too much into things. He picked up on the second ring. "I owe you an apology," I said. A pause. Then Ray's voice, "Careful, what happened?" I told him. Not everything. Not the spreadsheet. Not the legal details, but enough. The conversation I'd overheard. The name Lance. The 8 months she'd mentioned like it was a project timeline. Ray didn't say "I told you so." That's one of the things I've always respected about him. He just exhaled slowly and said, "Okay, what do you need? I need you to think back. Anything you noticed about Pamela in the last year? People she mentioned, places she went when she visited Raleigh, anything that seemed off. I need details, not impressions." He thought for a moment. There was a guy at Dana Hollis's birthday thing back in March. Pamela introduced him as someone from her professional group. Lance something. I didn't catch the last name. He shook my hand like he already owned the room. Lance something. March. That was 7 months ago. Did she introduce him to you specifically? Or was he just there? I pressed. She brought him over. Ray said flatly. Steered him right to our group. At the time I figured he was just a contact. But the way she watched him when he talked. Steve, I noticed it. I just didn't think it was my place to say anything. I wrote the name down. Lance. Professional group. March. After the call, I went back to the folder. I pulled out the USB drive, the one I'd encrypted with Carolyn's office 2 years ago, and plugged it into my laptop. Inside, backup copies of every major document. The business partnership agreement, the original property deed with its pre-joint title annotations, insurance policies, the secondary filing that reassigned survivorship rights to my family trust contingent on a specific legal breach. I'd put that last one in at Carolyn's suggestion and promptly forgotten about it. Now I was very glad I hadn't argued against it. I printed 12 pages and organized them into a new folder. Then I sent Carolyn a second message, bringing documents. This afternoon if possible. It's not what we thought. She replied in under 3 minutes. I have at 2 o'clock. Come then. I closed the laptop, straightened the desk, and walked to the kitchen for the coffee I'd never made that morning. Standing at the counter, I looked out the window at the backyard. The oak tree we planted the first spring we lived here, the stone patio. I'd laid myself over a long Labor Day weekend. I'd built this life with both hands. She'd been quietly dismantling it for 8 months, and she'd smiled at me across the dinner table every single night while she did it. I poured the coffee and drank it standing up. Then I picked up my briefcase and went to see Carolyn. Carolyn Drake's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown that smelled like old carpet and serious money. She'd been practicing family and business law for over 20 years, and the way she moved through a case, steady, unhurried, precise, was exactly what I needed that afternoon. I laid everything on her conference table. The prenup, the spreadsheet, the USB drive contents, printed and organized. The note I'd made about Lance from Ray's call. She read without interrupting, which I appreciated. Lawyers who talk while they read make me nervous. When she finished, she folded her hands on the table and looked at me directly. "How long have you known?" "Since this morning," I said. She nodded slowly. "Then we're ahead of her. That matters more than you think." Carolyn walked me through the legal framework with the kind of clarity that turned a complicated situation into something manageable. Clause 11 of the prenup was solid. She'd drafted it herself, and it had been reviewed by Pamela's own attorney before signing. The asset transfers I'd flagged were potentially recoverable if we could establish intent. The business ownership structure, she reminded me, had a licensing clause that made any transfer of intellectual property or client contracts impossible without my direct authorization and original signatory verification. Pamela didn't know about that clause. I'd buried it in the original partnership agreement years before we even discussed marriage. "She can't take the firm," Carolyn said simply. "Not a contract, not a client, not a trademark. It's legally insulated." "What about the house?" Carolyn allowed herself a small, precise smile. "You added her to the deed for tax purposes 9 years ago. But the original survivorship filing assigns full reversion to your family trust in the event of demonstrated intent to defraud. The language is triggered by what you overheard." She tapped the prenup. Combined with Clause 11, she walks away with what she came in with. I sat with that for a moment. "I want to know who Lance is," I said. "Full name, background, his connection to her, and whether there's a legal exposure." "I'll have someone on it by tomorrow morning," Carolyn replied, already making notes. I drove home feeling something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not anger, but focus. The sharp, clean kind that comes when a complicated problem finally shows you its edges. Pamela was in the kitchen when I walked in, making dinner like it was any other Thursday. She looked up and gave me the kind of smile that used to mean something. "How was the meeting?" she asked. "Productive," I said, setting my briefcase down. "A lot to work through, but we're making progress." She turned back to the stove. "You seem tired." "Long day." I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, watching her move around the kitchen with that practiced ease. 8 months. She'd been carrying this for 8 months and hadn't dropped it once. I gave her nothing to read in my face. Nothing at all. 2 days later, Carolyn called with a name. Lance Salinger, 43, formerly a senior account manager at a regional investment advisory firm until a compliance violation ended his tenure 18 months ago. Since then, a newly formed LLC, Salinger Venture Group, registered 3 months ago in North Carolina with 1 listed contact for business correspondence. Pamela's email address. She hadn't even used a separate account. "He's not just a boyfriend," I said. "No," Carolyn confirmed. "He's her exit vehicle. They're planning to run assets through his LLC and establish him as a managing partner in a consultancy built on your firm's client base and contracts." She paused, which, as we've established, they cannot legally do. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat at my desk for a long moment. Then I called Ray. "I need a favor," I told him. "Nothing complicated. I just need you to be available if I need a witness to something in the next few weeks." Ray didn't hesitate for even half a second. "Name the time and place," he said. "I've got you, Steve." That was the only answer I needed. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was reviewing a soil remediation proposal for a county contract. Unknown number. I almost let go to voicemail. Something made me answer. The voice was male, unhurried, with the particular confidence of a man who believes he's already holding the better hand. "Mr. Langley, I think we should talk like adults before this gets messy." I leaned back in my chair and kept my voice completely neutral. "Who is this?" "Someone with a mutual interest in a clean resolution," he said. "I'm going to be direct with you. Pamela and I have made plans. You filing or not filing doesn't really change the direction of things. What does change is how smooth the transition is. I'd rather this be smooth for everyone." Lance Salinger. In the flesh, so to speak. He kept going, filling the silence I'd deliberately left him. There's no reason this has to turn into a legal battle. You walk away with the firm intact. We're not interested in the day-to-day operations. We just need the infrastructure, client relationships, the state agency contracts, the licensing registrations. You'd be surprised how reasonable this arrangement could look on paper. I let him finish. Then I said, very quietly, I appreciate you calling. A pause. He hadn't expected that. So you're open to? I didn't say that. I cut in. I said I appreciate the call. There's a difference. I ended it there, set the phone on the desk, and immediately sent Carolyn a text with a timestamp and a summary of the conversation. She replied within minutes, documented. Keep your phone backed up. That call was a gift. She was right. A man threatening to take your business infrastructure over the phone was not a man making smart decisions. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I'd already started laying the countertrap. The previous evening, I'd left a document on the corner of my desk, slightly visible, facing the door. It looked like a routine financial summary, account headers, property lines, business valuations. A casual observer might assume it was an asset overview prepared for the divorce proceedings. What it actually contained was a set of numbers I constructed specifically to mislead, inflated account balances in accounts I'd already restructured, a property valuation that reflected an outdated figure, a business revenue line that omitted the protected IP clause entirely. Bait. Clean and deliberate. Pamela passed my desk 3 times that day. The third time, she slowed. That evening at dinner, she was noticeably warmer. Poured me iced tea without being asked. Asked about the county contract with what sounded like genuine interest. I answered calmly, gave her just enough detail to seem unguarded, and watched her file it all away behind those careful eyes. Then came the moment that nearly broke my composure. Tammy Briggs, Pamela's closest friend, a woman I'd always found slightly too loud for enclosed spaces, stopped by unannounced around 7. She and Pamela went out to the back patio with a bottle of wine. I was in the study with the window cracked, not intentionally positioned, just working. Their voices drifted in. Does he know you already talked to someone? Tammy asked. Pamela's reply was quick. No, and he won't. Lance has his own attorney reviewing the business filing. It's being structured so it looks like a standard consulting partnership. Tammy's voice dropped. And the account transfers. I thought you said those were done. Most of them, Pamela said. There's one more property-linked account I need to access before I pull the trigger. Lance thinks it's already clear, but I told him to wait until after Steven signs. She said it the way you discuss rerouting a delivery. No hesitation. No guilt. Tammy didn't know I could hear her. And Pamela didn't know that what she'd just described, intentional pre-filing asset movement linked to a fraudulent business registration, had a legal name that Carolyn was going to be very interested in hearing. I closed the window quietly, picked up my phone, and typed out everything I just heard word for word while it was still fresh. Then I sent it to Carolyn with one line. She just described the timeline herself. The invitation came from our neighbors, Phil and Donna Kerrigan. Their annual fall cookout, the kind of Charlotte Saturday event where people stand around a gas grill and pretend autumn isn't already slipping away. Pamela had RSVP'd for both of us before things had gotten complicated, and canceling would have raised questions neither of us wanted to answer yet. So we went. I'd been to enough of these gatherings to know how to move through one without giving anything away. Small talk, cold beer, laugh at the right moments. Pamela worked the crowd the way she always did. Fluid, charming, leaving each conversation looking like she'd made someone's afternoon. I watched her from across the yard and tried to remember the last time that ease had felt genuine to me. Then I saw him. He was standing near the drink table, talking to Phil with the relaxed posture of a man who considered most rooms beneath him. Late 40s, well-dressed for a backyard cookout, with the particular smile of someone who'd practiced it in front of a mirror. Pamela drifted toward that side of the yard within 10 minutes of our arrival. She didn't introduce him to me. She didn't need to. Lance Salinger. He was taller than I'd pictured, more polished. He shook Phil's hand with both of his, laughed at something, touched Pamela briefly on the shoulder as he spoke. Casual, proprietary. The kind of touch that assumes permission. I didn't move toward them. I stayed where I was, talked to Donna about her garden, drank half my beer slowly, and watched. Ray had driven up from Raleigh that morning. I'd asked him to come without explaining why, just said I needed him around this weekend. He appeared at my elbow around the time Lance started telling some story that had 3 people laughing. That him? Ray said quietly, not looking in that direction. That's him, I replied. Ray took a slow sip of his drink. I remember him now. From Dana's birthday. He stood the same way then. A pause. Like he's always the main character. I didn't respond. I was watching Pamela's face, the way it shifted when she was near him, softer and more alert at the same time. She used to look at me that way. I could place the exact year it stopped. We left the cookout after 90 minutes. Pamela was quiet in the car, which suited me fine. That night, I lay awake for a while, and my mind went somewhere I'd been avoiding. 7 years ago, the summer we renovated the kitchen. Pamela in paint-stained jeans, laughing at something I'd said while we argued about cabinet hardware. We'd been good then. Genuinely good. The kind of couple that other people pointed to. Somewhere between that summer and this one, something had shifted in her. I didn't know exactly when. I used to think it was gradual, just the natural cooling of a long marriage. Now I wasn't sure it had been gradual at all. Now I thought there might have been a specific moment, a specific decision she'd made, and everything after that was just execution. That thought was worse than anger. It settled into me like cold water into stone. In the morning I met Carolyn for coffee and told her about the cookout. She made a note of it without visible reaction, then slid a folder across the table. Lance Salinger's LLC registered 3 months ago, she said. But look at page 3. I turned to it. A consulting services agreement, drafted, not yet executed, naming my firm's 2 largest state agency contracts as transferable partnership assets to be absorbed in a Salinger Venture Group upon completion of the marital dissolution. She'd listed my clients by name. She gave him a client list, I said. She gave him a shopping list, Carolyn corrected, which she had no legal right to share. That document alone is enough to establish intentional misappropriation of proprietary business information. I sat with that for a moment. The specific anger of a man who built something carefully and watched someone treat it like a yard sale item. I want to set the next phase, I told Carolyn. She's been looking at that document on my desk. I want to give her something she can't resist passing to him. Carolyn's expression sharpened. Walk me through it. I did. She listened, asked 2 precise questions, and then nodded once. Do it. I'll have the monitoring framework in place by Thursday. I drove home with a plan and a folder, and for the first time since that Thursday morning in the hallway, I felt the weight begin to shift. I spent 2 evenings building the document. It looked real because most of it was real account headers, real property lines, accurate business structure language. What I changed were the specific figures and one critical omission. The intellectual property clause protecting all client contracts and firm licensing was nowhere in it. To anyone reading quickly, it looked like an unguarded asset overview. The kind of document that might make a person think the door had been left open. I printed it, placed it in a manila folder, and left it on the left corner of my desk on a Tuesday morning before Pamela woke up. Slightly angled, partially visible from the doorway. Then I went to the office and waited. Carolyn's monitoring system, entirely legal, tied to the firm's existing compliance infrastructure, flagged outbound data events from any device on our home network linked to my business domain. I had an alert set to my phone. The notification came at 2:17 that afternoon. File accessed. Photographed via mobile device. Outbound message sent from Pamela's personal email. She hadn't even waited until I was home. I forwarded the alert to Carolyn with one line. She took it. That evening, Pamela was in a noticeably good mood. She made dinner. Pasta, the kind she used to make early in our marriage when she was trying to impress someone. She poured wine, asked about my day with what sounded almost like warmth. I matched her tone exactly. Easy, unhurried. A man seemingly wrapping up a chapter of his life without bitterness. What I was actually doing was watching the timer run down on her plan. 3 days later, Carolyn called. Lance Salinger just filed a preliminary partnership registration using your business entity number, she said. He used the figures from the document you left. The unprotected version. She paused. The filing is fraudulent. He used your federal registration ID without authorization. That's wire fraud, Stephen. She caught herself, professional calm restored. The metadata on the submission traces back to a device registered to Pamela. Photographed from your home. Transmitted from her email, filed by him. The chain was complete. I asked Carolyn to secure a certified copy of the fraudulent filing and add it to the evidence archive. She'd already done it. One more thing, she added. Our forensic contact traced the financial transfers you flagged. The $40,000 she moved, it's sitting in Salinger Venture Group's operating account. She didn't just give him a client list. She seeded his business with your marital assets. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat at my office desk for a long moment. Then I called Ray. How's your schedule next week? I asked. Wide open for you. Ray answered without hesitation. Good. I'm going to need you in Charlotte. Things are about to move. That night, I slept 7 hours straight. The first full night of sleep I'd had in 3 weeks. Not because everything was resolved. Because the trap had closed and the evidence was locked, and what came next wasn't a battle anymore. It was a conclusion. Monday morning arrived cold and sharp, the kind of Charlotte October day that makes the air smell like something ending. I was at my office by 7:30. Dana, my office manager, had the coffee going and the morning report stacked neatly on the corner of my desk. I'd called her Friday afternoon and told her only what she needed to know, that I was expecting an unauthorized visitor, possibly that week, and that she should follow my instructions exactly when the moment came. Dana had been with me for 9 years. She didn't ask unnecessary questions. She just nodded and said, "Tell me what you need." I settled in and worked through the morning, 2 client calls, a compliance review for the county contract, a follow-up with our state agency liaison. Normal work. The kind that reminds you why you built something in the first place. Lance Salinger walked in at 11:14 a.m. I heard Dana's voice first, politely firm from the reception area, and then his smooth, unhurried, already performing. I stood up from my desk and walked to the doorway of my office. He dressed for the occasion. Dark jacket, open collar, the studied casualness of a man who wanted to look like he belonged in a room he'd never earned. He was holding a slim leather portfolio like a prop in a play he'd written for himself. When he saw me, he smiled. The same smile, I imagined, he'd used on half a dozen other men before me. "Stephen," he said, extending a hand. "Glad you're in. I thought we should finally meet properly." I didn't take the hand. I looked at him for a moment, long enough to let him feel the weight of it, then said, "Dana, please call building security." His smile held, but his eyes shifted. "There's no need for that. I just want 5 minutes. You're not going to get them," I replied evenly. "You're also not going to get the client contracts, the state agency agreements, the licensing registrations, or the business infrastructure you and my wife have been planning to absorb. None of that belongs to you. None of it ever will." He lowered the portfolio slightly. The performance was slipping. "You don't have to make this adversarial. We can structure something that works for everyone." I stepped closer, not aggressively, just close enough that he understood the distance was intentional. "You called my personal cell phone and told me you wanted the infrastructure of my firm. You sent someone to my office to deliver a message. And you filed a fraudulent business registration using my federal ID. I kept my voice level. That's not a negotiation. That's a criminal record in progress." The color in his face changed. Security arrived behind him. 2 men, quiet and professional. Lance looked over his shoulder, then back at me, and I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. The moment a man realizes the hand he thought he was holding is empty. "You're making a mistake," he said, but the confidence had drained out of it. "The only mistake I made," I answered, "was not paying attention sooner. That one's on me. Everything that happens next is on you." Security walked him out without incident. He didn't look back. I returned to my desk, called Carolyn, and gave her the full account while it was still fresh. She documented it, added it to the file, and told me the fraudulent LLC filing had already been flagged by the state and referred for investigation. "The chain is complete," she said. "Wire fraud, unauthorized use of your registration, documented conspiracy to misappropriate business assets." His attorney, if he gets a good one, will tell him to settle every claim immediately and quietly. After the call, Ray appeared in my office doorway. He'd been in the building's ground floor coffee shop the entire morning, available if I needed him. That's the kind of man Ray Brunner is. "Clean?" he asked. "Clean," I confirmed. He nodded once, satisfied, and went to get us both a coffee. I sat at my desk and felt the silence of a problem that had just run out of room to move. The office was still mine. The contracts were still mine. And Lance Salinger was walking back to wherever he'd come from with nothing but the portfolio he'd carried in as a prop. That afternoon I went home, and I waited for the phone to ring. Pamela called at 9:47 p.m. I was in the guest room, reading, when the phone buzzed on the nightstand. Her name on the screen. She'd been out since mid-afternoon. I'd heard the car leave around 4 and hadn't heard it return. Now it was nearly 10, and she was calling instead of coming inside. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Stephen. Her voice was tight, pressurized. What did you do? You'll need to be more specific, I said. Lance called me. Her words came faster now. That careful composure starting to fracture. He said you had security. Remove him from your building. He said you threatened him with fraud charges. That is not what we agreed. We didn't agree to anything, Pamela. I cut in, my voice steady. You made plans with another man using my business registration, my client list, and my marital assets. That's not an agreement. That's a crime. Silence. Then, you're overreacting. You don't have proof of any. I have the fraudulent LLC filing with my federal ID, I said. I have the financial transfer records. $40,000 moved in 7 months to Salinger Venture Group's operating account. I have a document you photographed in my study and emailed to him. I have the metadata, the timestamps, the outbound transmission logs. I paused. And I have what you told Tammy on the back patio 3 weeks ago about the property-linked account and the timeline. The silence that followed was a different kind. Not the silence of someone gathering an argument. The silence of someone watching the walls close in. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Lower. More careful. Stephen, listen to me. We can still figure this out. Whatever you think happened, this doesn't have to go where you're taking it. We've been together 14 years. That has to mean something. I said nothing. She kept going, and her voice softened further, the way it did when she was trying to reach the version of me she thought she still had access to. Maybe I made some mistakes. Maybe we both did. But we could slow this down. Take the filing off the table for now. Give it a month. Just 1 month. A pause. And when she spoke again, there was something genuine in it, or something that sounded genuine enough to sting. What if we still have a chance? What if this whole thing went too far and we both know it? I listened to her all the way through. Then I said, you know what, Pamela, maybe you're right. Maybe we moved too fast. Maybe there's still something worth looking at here. Dead silence on her end. I could feel her recalibrating, the sharp intake of breath that wasn't quite hope and wasn't quite relief. Really, she said. One word, barely above a whisper. No, I said, and I ended the call. I set the phone on the nightstand and sat in the quiet for a moment, listening to the house. No footsteps in the hall. No sound of key in the front door. Just the old wall clock in the kitchen, keeping its steady count. 20 minutes later, headlights swept across the bedroom window. Her car pulled into the driveway. I heard the engine shut off. I heard the car door open. And then, for a long time, nothing. Just Pamela sitting in the driveway in the dark because she had nowhere left to go that wasn't already compromised. She came inside eventually. Walked past the guest room without stopping. In the morning, Carolyn called before 8. The state has formally opened a fraud investigation into Salinger Venture Group, she said. Lance Salinger's attorney made contact with my office at 7 this morning. They're looking to settle all civil claims immediately to avoid further exposure. She let that land, then added, and I've spoken to the county. Your state agency contracts are fully secured. No disruption. I thanked her and hung up. Then I went to the kitchen and made coffee. Black, same as every morning, and stood at the window looking out the backyard. The oak tree we'd planted together. The stone patio I'd laid over a Labor Day weekend 14 years ago, one flat stone at a time. I'd built this life with both hands. She tried to take it apart with a borrowed plan and a man who turned out to be nothing more than a well-dressed liability. The county contract email was waiting in my inbox when I sat down at the desk. Approved. Renewed for 3 years. I read it twice. Then I got to work. The morning Carolyn scheduled the confrontation meeting, I drove to the office first. Not because I had urgent work. I just needed the familiar weight of the place around me before the day got complicated. I walked the floors, checked in with the county liaison about the contract renewal, reviewed 2 compliance reports. Normal work. The anchor kind. At 11, I drove to Carolyn's office. Ray was already in the parking garage when I pulled in. He'd driven up from Raleigh the night before and stayed at a hotel downtown. No drama. No questions, just present when I needed him. That's the measure of a man worth keeping in your life. We rode the elevator up together in silence. Pamela was already in the conference room when we arrived, seated to the left of her attorney, a man named Gerald Putnam who'd been in family law for 30 years and had the look of someone who'd seen every version of this conversation. He was reviewing documents when we walked in. When he saw the size of Carolyn's binder, his hand slowed. Pamela looked up. She was dressed carefully, composed on the surface, the way she always was in rooms where appearances mattered. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The particular stillness of a person who's been running hard and just hit a wall. I sat down across from her, folded my hands on the table, and said nothing. Carolyn opened without ceremony. She walked Gerald Putnam through the evidence file tab by tab. The financial transfer records, $40,000 moved over 7 months into Salinger Venture Group's account. The fraudulent LLC filing using my federal registration ID, traced by metadata to Pamela's device, sent from her personal email, submitted by Lance Salinger. The preliminary partnership agreement naming my firm's 2 largest state agency contracts as transferable assets. The conversation documented from the back patio, Tammy Briggs present, Pamela's own words describing the timeline and the property-linked account she intended to access before the divorce filing. Then Clause 11 of the prenuptial agreement. Carolyn read it aloud, slowly and clearly. Gerald Putnam stopped taking notes about halfway through. Pamela's attorney leaned toward her and said something quiet. She shook her head slightly. He leaned in again. This time she went still. When Carolyn finished, Putnam looked up. His expression had the resigned quality of a man recalibrating in real time. My client would like to discuss a negotiated resolution, he said. There isn't one, Carolyn replied simply. Clause 11 is unambiguous. The documented breach voids all marital asset claims. The fraud investigation into Salinger Venture Group is already open with the state. My client isn't here to negotiate. He's here to close. Pamela looked at me then, directly, for the first time since we'd sat down. I held her gaze without flinching, without anger, without satisfaction. Just steady. She opened her mouth, closed it. Then, quietly, she said, I didn't think you'd actually do this. I know, I said. That was your first mistake. Her jaw tightened. 14 years, Stephen. You're really going to sit there and... You sat across from me at dinner for 8 months. I cut in, my voice level but firm, while you moved money out of our joint accounts and planned to hand my business to another man. You want to talk about 14 years? I'll listen. But those 8 months exist inside those 14, and you don't get to pretend they don't. She looked away. Gerald Putnam placed a hand briefly on the table, a signal, not a touch, and she went quiet. The signing took 20 minutes. Pamela's hand moved slowly on the final page, but moved. When she set the pen down, she didn't look up. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and nodded to Ray. He stood with me. As we walked out, I heard Gerald Putnam's voice behind us, low and measured, talking to Carolyn about the remaining filings. The door closed behind us, and the corridor was quiet. Ray walked beside me to the elevator without speaking. When the doors opened and we stepped inside, he finally said, You okay? Yeah, I told him. I'm okay. He nodded. Good. Then let's go get lunch. You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in a month. I almost laughed. It was the most Ray thing he'd ever said, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. The movers came on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after the signing. Pamela had arranged everything herself. 2 men with a flatbed truck, efficient and quiet, working through the list she'd provided. Clothes, books, the framed artwork that had never really matched anything, but that she'd always insisted on keeping. I stood in the front doorway and watched them work without interfering. She stayed in her car the entire time. Parked at the curb, engine off, window cracked. I didn't approach. She didn't get out. When the truck pulled away, she started the engine and sat for another moment. Then she drove off without looking back. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner at the end of the block and felt something settle in my chest. Not relief exactly, more like the quiet that follows a long storm. I went inside and walked through the rooms. The house felt different, Not empty, just clarified, the way a workspace feels after you've cleared out everything that didn't belong there. On the kitchen counter was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Her handwriting, the old version, the careful, deliberate letters she used before everything turned sharp. Inside, a check, dated and signed, for the exact amount of money she'd transferred into Salinger Venture Group over 7 months. No note explaining it, just the number, precise to the dollar. Like an acknowledgement she couldn't bring herself to put into words. Beneath it, a single page printed from her email. A message she'd sent Lance Salinger 4 months ago. I recognized the timestamp, recognized the subject line. In it she described our morning routine. The way I made coffee. The way I checked the mailbox at the same time every day. She called it tedious, called me predictable, the kind of man who made a good background for other people's lives. He'd replied, "At least predictable men are easy to plan around." I read it once. Then I folded it and set it on the counter. I understood why she'd left it. It wasn't cruelty. It was honesty, her version of closing a door, showing me what the inside of her thinking had looked like, so I didn't spend the next 5 years wondering. I didn't spend 5 minutes wondering. I already knew. 2 months later, Ray called me on a Sunday afternoon. "Have you seen Lance Salinger's Instagram?" he asked. I hadn't been looking. I pulled it up while Ray stayed on the line. The most recent post was a beach photo, turquoise water, white sand, somewhere in the Caribbean that I couldn't immediately place. Lance in sunglasses, arm around a woman who wasn't Pamela. The caption read, "Starting fresh with someone who actually knows what real looks like." Last chapter taught me that the wrong partner poisons everything. Grateful to be past it. The wrong partner. He'd walked away from a fraud investigation, settled every civil claim against him at significant cost, and was now on a beach calling Pamela the problem. I set the phone down and looked out at the backyard. The oak tree. The stone patio. All of it still standing, still mine. Ray's voice came through the speaker. "You believe that guy?" "Completely," I said. "That's exactly who he is." Ray laughed. Short, dry, the laugh of a man who'd seen enough of the world to find it more absurd than surprising. I went out to the patio that afternoon with a glass of iced tea and sat in the chair I'd had out there for a decade. The late autumn light was doing something good across the yard, long and golden, the kind that makes everything look like it's been there forever. I thought about what I wanted the next chapter to look like. Not what I was walking away from. That was settled and signed and done. What I was walking toward. The county contract had been renewed for 3 years. 2 new clients had come on board in October. The firm was in the strongest position it had been in 5 years, maybe more. I had work that mattered, a cousin who drove up from Raleigh when I needed him, and an attorney who'd navigated the whole thing like a surgeon who actually liked her work. The house was quiet in the best way now. The clock on the kitchen wall still ticked the same as always. The oak tree in the backyard didn't care about any of what had happened. I finished the iced tea, went inside, and started making dinner. Not for anyone else, just for me. And that was exactly how it was supposed to be right now.